How many Taliban would there have been?
In one firefight, which is known as the Battle of Derapet now, there was reports up to 30 to 60 Taliban in the one fight.
Yeah.
And numbers, about 20 Australians and a handful of ANA as well, Afghan National Army. So
that you're outnumbered, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And they had better positions, they were prepared for us. And then all of a sudden it just crumbled again. As soon as the withdrawal took place, you just slowly watch those places that we fought over and, the bases that we had control of, the areas that we had control of, slowly go back into Taliban hands. I guess the resilience that was shown that day is those guys putting their mate on a chopper, saying goodbye, and then getting back into the fight. So it didn't just stop. Taliban didn't go, oh, we got one of you, see you later. We had to get back into it. So to get those guys back into the fight, that showed resilience just in that regard. So
your purpose wasn't to kill them all?
No, not at all. No. It was nothing like that. It never has been. It's always been about getting the country to stand up for itself, and a lot of people do confuse, discipline to structure. Discipline is not smacking your children and yelling at them and, as we call it in the army, knife handing them, stop doing that. Discipline is providing them that structure, getting them up in the morning so they can get ready for school at a decent time, make their own bed, put their clothes away, pick their towel off the floor, getting themselves ready. That's discipline. If you can show that vulnerability day in, day out, I think it's going to make you a stronger person.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean?
Growing up, copping smacks on the arse and being yelled at and abused as a kid by men, that created a negative impact. And they're the negative role models I refer to. So they've sort of shaped my values, towards that, being the empathetic human being that I am now. And that is showing that complete vulnerability as a male. I'm not afraid to cry in front of other males and youth and kids and show that vulnerability and show them that, yes, I can be, tough, but I can also be that compassionate human being.
Welcome back to the Stillness Everyday podcast. Today I've got Nathan Tolman on the podcast. Nathan is a veteran. He's done 6 tours overseas: Iraq, Timor, Afghanistan, Solomon Islands.
Solomon Islands,
Yep. And we're going to talk about what he's doing now and how he's helping veterans, I suppose, transition out of the military, finding stillness in their new life in the mundane world. We'll talk about his upbringing, why he joined the military, and, a few stories from, I suppose, while you're on tour. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a bit about your upbringing and why you decided to even join the military.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, I guess, to say the least. I was born in Blacktown down in Sydney, Western Sydney suburbs. So I always, proud to call myself a househo boy, housing commission. Single mum with 4 kids. So I had 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. Let's just say that the area itself, it helped me shape the pathway towards Defence Force, I guess, because of that discipline and everything else that come with it. It comes back to my mother and her poor choices in men. There was a few partners around which weren't the nicest, but at the time, growing up in that environment, it wasn't classed as, a bit of a beating on us kids or anything like that. It wasn't assault. It was just you're a naughty kid. Here's a smack every now and again. So
from your mum? That
was from my mum's partners and everything else. Yeah. So some of them, were probably negative role models in my life. And my brothers, we were, I would say, out of control kids growing up, especially my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. We used to fight a lot. Mum found it hard to control us, so she relied on those male figures to step up to the plate and, I guess, discipline us, whether it was fair or justified. But, being, brothers, would always have that little fight. Mum would try and intervene and would probably go at her. Yeah, we'd, kick holes in walls and punch holes in walls, call her names. It was terrible. And I have so much remorse now and that I did all that to her, and I always apologise. Hey, Mum, I'm sorry. Sorry for what we did. And she's just, you're just out of control a little bit. But it all stemmed down to, it was ADHD, which diagnosis of ADHD back then was a doctor going, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're a little bit out of control. You'll be okay." So there was, I guess it was violent towards ourselves. So I did have a male role model at that time was my granddad. He had a tough upbringing. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time with him, and we developed a real close bond, which I guess shaped the pathway to myself living with my grandparents for quite some time during the upbringing after some issues.
So did you know your father?
No, I never met my father. I think he shot through maybe during the pregnancy at some point. It was a teenage relationship. I'm pregnant and, see you later. That's just the way it went. It's never really affected me. I've never really dwelled on it. I don't even know his name for a reason. I don't care. Subsequently, I got a tattoo not long ago, and it's good old Bruce the Shark, where he's, quote, "I never knew my father," and I just make a bit of a joke of it. Mum called me a bit of a dickhead at the time, but yeah, so I guess the male influence was all negative up until my granddad. Turns out later on, I found out he wasn't even my granddad. He was a step-granddad.
Yeah, right.
I was more upset about that. Yeah, so I grew up with my grandparents after some troubles at home with mum's partners, etc. One in particular, he was recovering heroin addict, so he was into the methadone. And I guess that led me to the Central Coast in New South Wales, where I was going to a pretty good school, had some good friends, and we started just going to the beach and hanging out, and it was a really good lifestyle. At that point, I had no direction on what I wanted to do. However, the seed was being planted for the army, just due to the fact that my education standards weren't too high. I did year 12. Results were okay, but I knew I didn't want to go to university. I didn't want to apply myself. It may have been that whole ADHD thing coming in. The concentration was difficult for me at times. So I just wanted some structure. Spoke to my grandparents about joining the army, and walked off the beach at Newcastle into a recruiting centre, and I guess off I went at the age of 18. Yeah.
Was your grandparents involved at all in military?
No, not at the time. I didn't know anyone. Later on in life, I found out my granddad, my actual granddad, come back into our life, and I found out that he was in the Air Force. Yeah. And he fought in World War II and Vietnam. So he re-enlisted as pretty much an old man for Vietnam. That's the extent of our military history that I knew of. We had some distant relatives and who had fought in the Great War. I had some photos that Nan gave me, said it's your great uncle, blah, blah, blah. But that was it, yeah. So sort of shaped my own pathway. I didn't know too much about it. I just seen the ads on TV, soldiers running around in tanks, jumping out of planes, and I just thought it was an interesting lifestyle. Growing up, I didn't go on holidays or anything like that, so it was an opportunity to travel as well. And it was all my friends. They were off on trades, and what I noticed is that all these trades and everything else, they were influenced by their own family because it was a natural pathway. So I didn't have that, so I had to shape my own, and that's where the army come into it in 2000.
It seems like a obvious kind of path for someone who didn't have like a father in their life, maybe. It's like because you'd get like a discipline and structure, like you said, out of the military. Exactly.
And it definitely helped me. I was slow to adapt, I think, in the beginning through recruiting and everything else.
Were you like the soldier that got in trouble?
I wouldn't say in trouble. I got in, for not doing things like shaving correctly or... I'd never used a razor blade until I joined the army, so I didn't even know how to shave my face. They give you a lesson on it. They'd be like, "You didn't shave properly." I didn't know. I don't know how I'm using this razor. So little things like that, which you should have, a positive role model to show you how to do that, like a father or... Yeah, and I guess, not making my bed correctly or not polishing my brass or boots in the way that they wanted you to. I got in a little bit of trouble adapting in that way. I guess after a while I started finally getting it and grasping it and getting that routine and discipline, and it helped out. So
by the time you left, you were yelling at the other ones to do their job, or
I wasn't really. I don't consider myself a yeller. I don't think it had an impact, especially with this day and age. And I've been in plenty of positions, instructional postings and positions throughout all ranks where I didn't find that it really worked with everyone. Everyone reacts differently and responds differently. but I'm not much of a yeller.
If you were in your recruiting stage, because I had a mate who went through it, what was the position of the guy who would yell at you for not shaving properly?
Oh, that was a corporal. Yep. Yeah, right. Corporal or bombardier.
So that was higher than you got to?
Yes. Oh, that was not higher than what I got to. That was lower than where I got to in my career. So I was a corporal at some stage, and I was fortunate enough to deploy to the Solomon Islands and Iraq as a corporal. So I actually actively led troops overseas, which was a great thing for me. But looking back now, a lot of those instructors when I was going through, they were missing the trips, so they weren't being deployed to Timor. So I think they were carrying some sort of resentment, and they just wanted to come at you for that reason. I think there was just some anger behind it, some compartmentalisation there going, I'm just going to beat these guys because I'm here instructing and teaching new recruits, as opposed to going to East Timor and serving with my mates and leading trips myself. So
people wanted to go on tour?
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's like joining a rugby league team and not playing and training all your life and not being on the field. So, but it was great. I joined at the perfect time. It was the time where we were deploying to East Timor, and for the next 15 years or so, I was just going from one trip to the other. Or we're always training for something. Where it's changed a little bit now. We're training for COVID or, some sort of emergency relief. Or,
What about Ukraine?
Yeah, well, funny you mentioned that. We do have troops over in the UK, or we might still have them there. I know rotation's just come out of some guys going over and training their soldiers or potential soldiers. So not in the Ukraine, but... Yeah, they're over in the UK helping out. So to a modern soldier, someone who's in right now, that's the bee's knees. It's, they're happy. That's their deployment as such for the moment. Unless we deploy somewhere else or go over to Ukraine and fight a war there. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. That's my personal opinion.
So when you go over and train their military, is that what you did in Afghanistan?
A little bit of everything. So every trip that I went on was different.
Yeah.
So my first one, East Timor, that was United Nations. Would come out of Ineffet, which that involved a few significant things for those who were over there. But by the time I got there in 2002, it would transition to UN, so like peacekeeping, Blue Beret, border patrols, just keeping the TNI and the Indonesians at bay. Indonesians, yeah. So they were at the West Timor border.
Oh, right.
So, and they were always doing dodgy stuff. So we'd set up observation posts, keep an eye on them. There was nothing, let's just say we were there for presence, just to make the local villages, especially on the border where I was, just feel a little bit safe. And, it was hard infantry work, packs on the back, lots of walking. I was a young soldier at the time carrying the machine gun, so my load carriage was a little bit more, I think, than, just a rifleman, but we took pride in that. And, it was just hard yakka. And being a 20-year-old kid, I was enjoying every minute of it. It was good. You formed good teams, good bonds, and you were doing your job. We're on that footy paddock, weren't we? So
was there any firefighting there?
Not there, no. We didn't have too much occur. We stumbled across old pineapple grenades from World War II, little things like that. Vehicle accidents, just people in the village, acting out and coming at each other with a machete and few cuts and bruises here and there, but nothing significant. Like the transition into Iraq in 2004, that was a bit different for us. That was more looking after the embassy. I did 2 tours on the embassy, and that was more...
What do you mean looking after the embassies, the Australian embassy?
Yeah, the Australian embassy. So we had an ambassador and a whole bunch of staff there. So we would provide them security on any meetings that they had in and out of the red and green zone. So green zone was, at that time, it was safe. Yeah, the red zone, obviously unsafe. We were in the red zone on the first tour. So we'd just be running around, standing on the streets of Iraq for hours at a time while a meeting took place. Who knows if someone's going to drive by, detonate a vehicle-borne IED. You just don't know. So,
did a green zone ever turn red while you were there?
So they changed. We actually were in the red zone in 2004, and then the embassy, or the building next to it, which we occupied as soldiers, that's where we slept and lived and everything, that was actually a vehicle-borne IED pulled up and detonated. A couple of soldiers were injured. We were fortunate enough not to be there at that time, but we filled those sandbags day in, day out when we were there. So, and then the embassy moved into the.
What do you mean you filled the sandbags?
Oh, physically, the barriers. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so we had to fortify it. You know?
Right.
Yeah, just like in World War II, and what's happening in the Ukraine now, you've got to fortify your positions to keep yourself safe and stop blasts and everything else. So, we had rockets fired at us, and lots of small arms like shooting, not directly, at us as individuals, but at the building or drive-bys. A lot of celebrationary fire. It's a wedding would happen, and you just hear all the shooting. Can't do anything about that. The round's got to land somewhere, so bouncing off the buildings. But so that was a bit different there. That was more like security and protection. Whereas transitioning further into Afghanistan in around 2010, and even my most recent 2018-19, it was protecting Australian soldiers. So we would have our high-ranking officers. They'd be doing their job as mentors to the Afghan National Army. So my soldiers and our job was to protect them so it's force protection. They were known as guardian angels. So we'd send out a couple of guys, and they'd just provide security, standing around in their gear for long periods of time. So it's just security work. So lots of different jobs, and then there's the full war fighting stuff, which we pretty much experienced in 2010 against Taliban and insurgency, where we went in fighting, and they're shooting us, we're shooting back. It's blowing us up.
So when you enter into that, like in a helicopter or something, or
different methods. Most of it was mobile on in our vehicles. And we pull up short, way in the desert, known as a dashed, and we'd walk into, it's like a green belt. It's like where all the the hub of the villages are, because that's where the rivers run, so it's a little bit greener, but surrounding that is just desert. So we'd park well and truly in the desert, so we're out of shooting range. Walk in, and generally by the time we got into that green belt, someone's shooting at us because they've seen us coming in. So you could anticipate what's going on. Another indicator that we were going to get into a fight or something was going to happen is the local population disappear. Or locking down. So you don't see any kids or women around because the male's getting ready for a fight. And it's safe generally when the kids are out asking for lollies and whatever else, and Mr. Water, little things like that. So they were combat indicators.
So when you're coming in, is there some guys a bit further back with?
We've got Overwatch. So that's I guess in summary, just a short overview of some of the jobs that we did in my career anyway.
And in those firefights, I imagine that's where you saw some of your mates lose their lives. Definitely. On our tour in 2010, we did 9 months in Afghanistan, and we lost 6 of our own from our battle group. I've got the bracelet on for each one of those still to this day. And then we lost a further 4, special forces operators as well. How many Australians soldiers would be there at one time?
We had a battle group, so anywhere up to 600 to 800 soldiers just in that battle group, and then there's the supporting elements and logistics and everything else. It's, it could be anywhere up to 2,500, 3,000.
The US, how many would they have?
I couldn't tell you numbers. I know in 2009 they brought in another 30,000. So we were over there around that time, that transition piece as well. That same trip, it was talk of closing down, withdrawing troops, but still took 10 years to withdraw out of Afghanistan. But we did see massive numbers of American troops increase, especially in our area. As the French pulled out of theatre of operations, we took over some of their jobs, which was great for us. It gave us more to do. At the same time, because they were winding down, they're not actively going out and pushing the enemy away and keeping a little bit of a buffer. So, because they want to keep themselves safe. So by the time we got in, every time we went out, something would happen. So a lot of our operations in that time were based on just trying to keep the Taliban away a little bit. And that's, unfortunately, we lost one of our guys on one of those operations.
How many Taliban would there have been?
In one firefight, which is known as the Battle of Derapet now, there was reports up to 30 to 60 Taliban in the one fight. And numbers, about 20 Australians and a handful of ANA as well, Afghan National Army. So, we had a pretty big firefight that day.
So that you're outnumbered, basically?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And they had better positions. They were prepared for us. We had some heavy machinery going, but one of our guys ended up, paying the ultimate price, and he was, shot and killed. Which it sort of had an impact at the time on our guys and the operations, and it was very rare for a soldier to be shot. It's generally an IED, so improvised explosive device that killed most of our guys.
Why don't they get shot normally?
Well, maybe our gear, our standard operating procedures, and generally they would hit us, the Taliban, and we draw. And you think about what they're wearing pretty much what we are now. Very light equipment. They've got a weapon, a couple of magazines, and they can get out of there. We're lugging 50 kilograms, so we can't really chase them up. It's not like the movies. So that hit us and moved to another position. So it was very hard to, I guess, get an indication exactly where they were fighting from or getting a bead on them and trying to figure out how you're going to deal with the situation. And 9 times out of 10, they're shooting, off goes the weapon, and out comes a shovel. So...
What do you mean?
They're just farmers.
Oh, right. Yeah, so then you can't shoot them.
Yeah, exactly. So our rules of engagement. Yep. So we had to be careful of that. And we did have other things that we could test for.
What happened if you accidentally did?
Oh, you're in trouble. Yeah, we have rules of engagement we have to follow.
Right. So they know that?
Yeah, they know that. Yeah. And there are ways around it. We carried like a spray where we could test for residue and stuff. So generally you get it just in the web of your hand. Give them a spray. Oh, you've been playing with, cordite, which is the from the rifle.
Yeah, right.
So, and we could pretty much detain them on the spot.
Yeah.
And we'll get them out of there and hand them over to local authorities.
Yeah.
And they deal with it. So just the nature of it. It's tricky. It was tricky.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why we're pretty lucky in that regard, because most of it was, if they were shooting at us, it's because maybe an IED, an explosion had gone off, and we're dealing with that. Maybe we've got a couple of guys who are injured. They might take a couple pot shots at us just to draw us into somewhere and then go. It's preservation for themselves, really, and that's basically a complex ambush.
So if one of your guys got shot, is it first priority to help them, or is it keep fighting?
Both. Yep. You can't stop fighting. You stop fighting, you'll have more casualties. So... the one incident that we had is we continued to fight, and at the same time, my job was I was a sergeant at the time, so we practice this in Australia so many times when we have a casualty, and before we train in Townsville and do our mission readiness exercises, and that would be practice, having a casualty, and when it does happen, it's just instinct. Everyone knows what they're doing. So when we lost a soldier, I just pretty much ran down, linked up with our engineers, and they carry mine labs, so we need to land a chopper and to get our casualty out of there. We didn't know the situation at the time. Just knew that we needed to get him out of there, get him safe. And they had their mine labs, so metal detectors, and they just swept the landing zone, or the potential landing zone, so we could get a chopper, because we don't want the chopper landing and blowing up. I ran straight down. We sighted somewhere to land the chopper. We sent the information over, and about half an hour later, chopper comes in to collect the casualty. But the boys are still dealing with him, CPR and treatment. 5 meters away from that is, the guys are shooting and covering. So it's all communication. So, radio, as you've got to stretcher him down, because we had him on a hill, had to get him down, and we needed covering fire. So luckily we had some vehicles with 25mm cannons that were supporting us. So that helped out a lot. Yeah, and then we had a lot of bravery on that day as well. We had one of the guys just drawing fire, and he was later awarded the Victoria Cross. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, so there were some great actions just on that one day, and that's one of many situations that the boys went through over there around that time. There's too many, I guess, to talk about. Yeah, and we weren't the only call sign or combat team to have a fight like that. Some of the other combat teams did. They had some big ones too, and so they've got their stories. And
the guys who are doing CPR, I imagine that'd be the most traumatic.
Yeah, I guess now, I don't think many of that platoon is still serving. I was one of the last to be serving out of that platoon. And those guys are still going through some stuff at the moment. Giving one of your mates CPR is probably not the nicest thing, but at that time, it's just do what you need to. And even though you know that, there's no vital signs there and there's nothing getting through, you got to continue it. But that's, I guess the resilience that was shown that day is those guys putting their mate on a chopper, saying goodbye, and then getting back into the fight. So it didn't just stop. Taliban didn't go, oh, we got one of you, see you later. We had to get back into it. So to get those guys back into the fight, that showed resilience just in that regard. So
where do they get all their weapons from?
Sneaking them in through surrounding nations, and they're all Chinese and Russian weapons, aren't they? And a lot of it would be left over from the Russian war from the 80s. So we'd find them everywhere.
So they weren't. The weapon standard wasn't as good as yours.
No. They had like an equal caliber in some of the weapon systems, so the same size rounds, but some of them were trained pretty high. And like I said, some were just farmers. They just take a couple pot shots and put their weapon away for the day and tend back to their crops. So, and that's their income. They've got to tend to their poppy fields and marijuana fields to feed their family. So have a few shots.
What are the marijuana fields for? Is that like medicinal?
Oh, no. That's, it's more high level than that. It's their source of income. Yeah, right. Same with the poppies.
It's not illegal over there?
Oh, yeah. So we didn't deal with much of that. You can't touch them, you can't destroy them because you're burning their economy. And, I guess it all comes down to counterinsurgency operations. You don't want to piss the locals off too much, but... we patrolled through many of those fields, got some great photos, and, you always wanted photos of sitting in a marijuana crop and send it home or whatever. And it's just it's normal. It became normal walking through those things.
So it's all drug money, basically.
Oh, yeah.
That would go to Europe
fund.
Or whatever.
Yep, and it'd probably fund the Taliban and everyone else. So, but... we know what we're there for, and we're there for each other and to represent the country in the best way we can.
And do you work with like the other militaries, like US?
Yep. On numerous occasions, we've worked with around that 2009 period is when we seen a lot more Americans come through, 30,000 or whatever was come over. A lot of them were, what do they call it, stop loss, where they go home a couple of months and then boom, get back on the plane, you're going. Yeah, so
you had no time off when you're there?
We had we get 10 days to 14 days off, and you can go back to Australia. At the time, I was married, had one child, so I just flew home to Australia, spent time with the family. So 1 minute you're on a patrol in Afghanistan, the next few days you're back home, and I remember just at a hotel on the Sunshine Coast, just by a pool, and just going, a week ago, a couple of our guys just got blown up. So there's no real easing into a bit of leave. And then the next, week or so, you're back into it. So,
but when you're over there, you can't have time off?
No. There's no days off. You might have some downtime. But what's downtime? That's, getting the vehicles good to go, make sure your weapons are fixed, making sure the guys are fed. It depends on the operation too. Like, don't get me wrong, like my last trip to Afghanistan in 2019 or 2018-19, lots of downtime for me. But the boys were out there working, and my downtime was just go to the gym, and it was
local gym or your US.
US gym, yep. So it's like US going style. You know, they have Hungry Jacks and pizza and everything else, so you can. Yeah, it's
what, they go and set them up there in their bases?
Yeah, they've got everything. They've even got they had a TGI Fridays, from what I can remember, on in 2009, a restaurant. So yeah, they had it all. They definitely travel in style. But their soldiers, they do long rotations, and they do 12 months on their tours, whereas ours are, you know, anywhere between 6 and generally and 9 months. So, yeah, so they get it pretty harsh in terms of time off and everything else, but they do travel in style with their food and everything else. It's their little luxuries, I guess, modern luxuries.
Keeps them happy.
Yeah.
So tell me, what I don't understand is how that war can go on for so long with the most powerful militaries in the world there, and then they still won in the end?
I guess there was no winner and loser. Maybe from a soldier's perspective, you've seen the changes. When we first went into Afghanistan, you know, in, say, 2001, post 9/11, you had special forces. They were going from cave to cave and, you know, mountain to mountain, you know, getting the Al-Qaeda fighters out of there. That was what their target was. And there was a little, I guess, lull where they transitioned over to Iraq, started fighting there, come back to Afghanistan, and you did see it. It was all about reconstruction, you know, and just making sure that, I guess, the country had education, you know, human rights, you know, girls could go to school, building schools, giving them a level of education to help them through some sort of, you know, life outside of Taliban and Al-Qaeda rule. And then you're seeing it transition over to training their army. They have to stand on their own 2 feet, and so training them in resources, equipment, that was a hard job in itself. Like, to get them motivated, which was our...
To get them motivated?
Yeah, they're not a motivated country. Yeah, right. They'll only work on certain days. You know, don't try work on their religious days. Yep. They won't do it. Yeah, so just trying to get them moving was a hard thing.
And what's the language barrier?
We had interpreters. So yeah. So 2009 we started all that, and come 2018-19, where yes, they had an army, they were starting to function, had their own government legislation, and everything was running. I try not to get into the political side of it, and it's, but yeah, and then all of a sudden it just crumbled again as soon as the withdrawal took place. You just slowly watch those places that we fought over, and, you know, the bases that we had control of, the areas that we had control of, slowly go back into Taliban hands. And even watching the fall of, was it Hamid Karzai Airport, International Airport? So that's the main airport where, you know, people were trying to flee the country. We're talking interpreters and anyone that assisted, you know, coalition forces, just trying to get safe. And, you know, subsequently a lot of American soldiers and civilians were killed in that vehicle-borne IED that went off just outside the gate. And I guess 2 years before that, I was living there, you know, in that same airport. So, and that's where all the pizza shops were. And
oh, really?
Yeah, and everything. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but, you know, if we dwell...
but how did the Taliban, like, your purpose wasn't to kill them all?
No, not at all. No. It was nothing like that. It never has been. Oh. It's always been about getting the country to stand up for itself. And, you know, don't get me wrong, there were sympathisers everywhere, and Taliban sympathisers, there were, you know, coalition sympathisers. And
what do you mean by that? So
locals who would be, they're willing to help us, and there were other locals who were willing to help the Taliban, because Taliban was still, you know, giving them resources and money, and, you know, but do you want to, you know, I'll give you a new watch, you know, and I'll give you some money so you can feed your kids for the next week. Next day we come in and we're like, we can help you with this. And like, yeah, no worries, we'll take what they can off us. And, you know, so it was whoever's there at the time. Yeah. Right. So it was hard. But, yeah, that's what I said. We couldn't dwell on that. We knew that it was happening. You still got to try.
So would you say it was successful overall, or?
From a individual soldier's perspective, going on an operation like that, or operations like that, it's successful in your career. because that's what we all want to do. We want to help somebody. I guess it's human nature, you know, and if you're an empathetic person, you go over there for those small moments, and some of those small moments could be, you know, giving a little kid a bottle of water, and he'll remember that for the rest of his life on how, you know, an Australian soldier gave him a bottle of water. So he's probably more sympathetic towards us. The Taliban the day before may have just shoot him away, just go away, palm him in the face. So that could be the difference between having an extra fighter. You know, my kids could be fighting against that same kid in a few years. So I guess that's those little things. It's why we did it. So they're the little wins that I looked for. You know, and making sure the guys were safe. And and that's a win for me. But overall, I don't think there was any winner or a loser.
Enough about war.
Yeah.
I want to kind of go back to your like upbringing, in the sense of you didn't have a father, but you've now got kids, and do you see that like importance of importance of you in that position? Yeah,
being a father and a soldier for all those years, it was probably the most important thing. And I do look back now, and I know that I was probably a selfish father. I still think I was a good dad, but I looked at positive role models in my life as opposed to the negative ones. Like my granddad, he was caring, or step-granddad. He was caring, he was compassionate. So he sort of shaped me to become, the human that I am. Even though I didn't have the skills in being a father, I didn't know what a father looked like. However, I knew, due to those negative role models, on, what not to do. And, being around guys who, were into drugs and alcohol and just had all those demons, I didn't want to be a part of that. Never touched drugs. And I know kids are going out there, and I've got a teenager now who wants to experiment, and I'm like, okay, go experiment. If you want, let me know. I'm not going to come down too hard. I need honesty because it's a good value, as opposed to most teenagers now, they run out and do it behind your back anyway. So,
exactly.
It's communication. Communication has probably been the biggest thing for my kids. I've always been open about everything in my life, my military life. My 11-year-old starting to understand my military life a little bit more. He's heard me speak about some of the traumas, some of the positives, some of the negatives. But they need to know it all to understand it, and hopefully it has a positive effect on them, when they become fathers. It could be a few years away now. And
when you see your kids now versus you take you back to their age, do you think having you in their life has taken them on a different path?
Yeah, I think it is, but it's just not... I don't look at it as just me shaping their pathway. They have a stepdad now shaping their pathway. So they have some really good positive role models. I'm glad that they have, two dads as opposed to zero. And we probably make poor choices with the kids individually, but if we can communicate even as parents, we can have the best outcome for our kids. So, because both our kids, which is great.
Do you get along, obviously?
Yeah, we get along. Yeah. We have a great relationship. It's like not call each other up and, hey, mate, how you going? Let's have a chat. Let's go have a beer or something. It's not like that. But we communicate about the kids and ex-wife. We communicate. So, it's, it is the old saying of it takes a village to raise a family, raise the kids. It's exactly what's occurring. So I'm glad that they have those opportunities, the things that I didn't have. Even the ability to travel and to get in a car and go places. Like, I never had that opportunity too often because Mum didn't have a car, so we always relied on a bus. I'd never been in a plane until I joined the army and then had to jump out of it. So they have a lot more opportunities, but at the same time, I don't want them to be spoiled. And so... I
think that's the fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah. So connection and communication, it's key to me to raising my children. And, they're good boys.
So I can definitely see that you see the benefit of having a father figure in the children's life, because it's kind of where I was going with it. I mean, I know my parents separated when I was 13, and I know the discipline and structure kind of, it left the house because, I mean, even though your mum, you know, can yell and whatever, you get to a point where you're just now not going to listen anymore, like I'm sure what you were doing when you were young.
Yep.
So you do kind of need, whether your dad is going to whoop your ass or just, you know, be there to give you stern direction.
And that's right. And you mentioned discipline, and a lot of people do confuse, you know, discipline to structure. You know, discipline is not smacking your children and yelling at them and, as we call it in the army, knife handing them, stop doing that, you know. Discipline is providing them that structure, getting them up in the morning so they can get ready for school at a decent time, make their own bed, put their clothes away, pick their towel off the floor, you know, getting themselves ready. That's discipline. Going to bed at a normal time as opposed to sitting on the Xbox and gaming on COD all night and then being super tired for school the next day. To me, you know, providing that discipline as a parent is probably the most important thing. Even though I'm considered probably a holiday dad because I get my kids every second weekend, and so I do let them get away with a little bit more. But I'm always communicating about, hey, you need to get a good sleep. You need to wake up. You need to clean your room a little bit. It doesn't have to be to army standards. That's not discipline. You know, shake your doona out, you know, get your clothes off the floor. It's pretty simple. That is discipline itself, because it's setting them up for life, to have some sort of structure. Yeah, it's not just yelling at your kids and telling them what to do. It's showing them how to do that. So that's probably what I didn't have growing up. I wouldn't say it's the army that gave me that. It's taking pride in my things and not having much, not having the best toys and bikes and everything else. But once a week I'd pull out my bike and wash it. And just having respect and the discipline to look after my things. And I'm still trying to teach my kids that. Even over the weekend, my son, I showed him how to wash his bike, and, you know, little things like even how to turn on the hose and unroll it, you know, little things like that. He didn't have those skills. But if I can teach him to look after his things will look after him, you know, down the track. So pretty much don't be a sport brat.
Well, I think, I mean, if you came from nothing and then you have, you know, things to give to them, you can kind of, I've seen it so many times where it's like, have everything, but then the repercussions of that are kind of no different to having nothing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because you actually don't value anything that you've got, and you don't know how to create it yourself, and et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, and you do see it. There's so many kids out there who just take full advantage of the things that they have, and they don't respect it. You know, and even now I mentor children and teens, and you know, on our camps I teach them just to be responsible for their water bottle. You know, just carry your water bottle. We've given you some things to look after, and every 2 minutes, it's we get called sir or ma'am or whatever. It's sir, I've lost my water bottle. I'm like, you need to be responsible for your water bottle. It will help you survive. So just little things like that. That's it is an army thing. The 1%ers win the wars, and they do. You know, you get the little things right, the big things will come easy. Yeah.
Let's anything there. Even that's like business background is obviously my life, and that's, you know, you can't miss the little things. Otherwise, big things don't happen.
Yeah.
Where I was leading with that comment before was, I suppose, having a father figure in your life, like you've got that kind of something to teach you strength. I don't know how I'm going to word this, but I suppose that quote that keeps coming up is the good times create weak men and bad times create strong men. I'm not sure you've heard that one before.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
And I suppose listening to you've obviously come out of 20 years of it's just like on all the time.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you can see it's not like maybe you would call it a hard time. It probably is. It was hard time constantly, wasn't it? So you created a strong man. But then you see what's being formed in society today. Do you look at that, and do you have any comment about it?
I do, and I guess that brings us on to, like, you know, the whole masculinity thing. And, you know, I think it's, for me, I don't consider myself, you know, a masculine person in the way of I have some good values, and I link that to those values. So, which is empathy. You know, I'm compassionate, I'm caring, and I think that is probably the strongest masculinity you can get. And, you know, what do they call it? It's a flex. It is exactly that. And culturally, you know, I think the days have gone where I grew up in the 80s where housing commission, you know, you're expected to be strong, and the more you smack kids or, you know, yell at them, it's going to make them stronger. It's by far, it's definitely not the right thing. It's not going to create a stronger man. It's going to create probably a weaker man. And I think those days are gone. Where we're at now is the fact that, you know, my own kids, I want them to be vulnerable, and, you know, that will develop their masculinity. 100%. It's going to, if they can be empathetic and caring, and culturally we can do that, I think we're going to create better men, as opposed to the old days. I say the old days like I'm old now, but it's what it is. If you can show that vulnerability day in, day out, I think it's going to make you a stronger person.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean?
Growing up, you know, copping smacks on the arse and being yelled at and abused as a kid by men, that created a negative impact, and they're the negative role models I refer to. So they've sort of shaped my values, you know, towards that, being the empathetic human being that I am now. The army, inclusive of that, when I first joined, it was all about be hard, be disciplined, you know, not the disciplined as in make it better, but be disciplined, be assertive, be the man. And if you're not performing, you know, you'll cop a flogging or some abuse. It's definitely shaped me to where I want to be now. And that is showing that complete vulnerability as a male. Like, I'm not afraid to cry in front of other males and youth and kids, and show that vulnerability and show them that, yes, I can be, you know, tough, but I can also be that compassionate human being. And hopefully, you know, that does have an impact on our future.
I tend to agree, but there's a part I disagree, and the only part I disagree, I think you've come from that, where it's like you know what it's like. I feel like a lot of men today, they don't know what the discipline and the getting yelled at or getting hit or all of those actually what it's like to be strong before they've decided to start crying. So that's what I exposed, that part between like the reason you're opening up and being vulnerable might be because of your trauma around killing someone or watching your mates die. Someone else might be because, you know, they got a soy latte instead of an almond latte, and do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm being extreme, but the society's norm of the weakness that we're calling vulnerability, which I know what you're saying, being comfortable with sharing your feelings, etc. But I feel like we've gone too far the other way, where it's all about feelings and no one's doing anything. Yeah.
So you think it could be, you know, culturally, or that person's upbringing.
I feel like culturally or society is definitely shaping us towards a more feminine men. Yeah,
and, you know, are we doing that ourselves as parents? So, you know, I know that, you know, I'm going to be fair to my kids. I'm going to ground them. I'm going to take things away from them. I'm going to take the things that they care about, like their gaming or their Wi-Fi. I'm going to take that away. And, you know, that whole someone gets angry because they didn't get their soy latte. It's, you know, I just think it's ridiculous, and it definitely comes back to, you know, their own upbringing and their family values, because the values do come from your own family. And you know, and if some kid has been sport his whole life, you know, that's, you know, that is showing poor values in their own family culture. I think that's where we're going wrong as parents, and that's where we've got to get it right. Otherwise, we're creating this spoilt, you know, society. Yep.
Which is where I speak a lot about having, you know, we have a masculine and feminine within ourselves, but within a family unit, we should have a masculine and feminine role models for a child, in the sense of we need the nurturing, but we also need the discipline. And I think the path that we're heading, which is more broken families, weaker men but stronger females, it kind of creates this, you know, disconnect where you've got strong independent women who haven't got a man, so they're being forced into their masculine roles, then trying to care for their children when they're stressed as well. So there's imbalance in the masculine, in the man, and imbalance in the female. I feel like your integration is you've come from difficult time for 20 years. So to be able to integrate a bit of feminine is probably really good for you, because it's softening you from watching bombs blow up.
Yeah, but, you know, there's the other end of the scale, and I completely agree with where you're coming from. But is it in relation to respect? Are we not teaching, or not even teaching, we're not integrating respect into kids' lives as they're growing up, just as a society and a culture? You know, respecting each other, saying thank you when you do receive that soy latte, or, you know, just saying, oh, sorry, I've got the incorrect order here. Is it okay to exchange it? You know, myself, I usually just go, oh, it's incorrect. That's all right. I'll deal with it. I'm not gonna die from drinking the wrong latte.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think it's definitely linked into respect, and I guess now that's why I'm, you know, involved in helping teenagers to hopefully shape some of their futures and teach them respect towards their parents, because you know, it does go back to my childhood. I didn't have any respect for my family, I guess. Yeah, hopefully we can fix that process.
I think it's probably, I mean, with programs like you're doing, it's definitely going to be helping. I think there's a word I'm looking for. It's like the contrast of, you've seen what, like, these kids grow up and they're so happy to get a water bottle, and then your kid might yell at you because he wants to play Xbox till midnight. And it's like, obviously I'm not saying this is what does happen, but to be able to come in and tell that child, like, look, you should be grateful you even got an Xbox and we're going to bed at 7.
That's right. Yeah.
So that is the respect thing.
And you get the same result. Like, you know, I may be involved in helping teens, but my own teens, they'll still give me that same disrespect. And the minute I'll, you know, tell them to turn that Xbox off or go to bed early, we get the same reactions. And most parents would understand this, is you get the, you know, and some cheeky comment, and it's how we respond to that, you know, whether it's, you know, do we go at them or escalate your voice a little bit, turn it off now, turn it off now, or I'm turning the Wi-Fi off, and eventually you'll get the outcome. But I completely agree with that comment, and it's a difficult one. And we're not going to find a solution for every person, because every child's going to be different. Every kid's upbringing is going to be different. But, you know, if we can just find little ways within ourselves for our own kids' benefits, it's going to help a lot.
Would you say that compulsory military service, like it used to be, I don't know if it was in Australia, I know it was in Cyprus where my family's from, but do you think that would have benefit on the population?
I think it would have a benefit on some of the population. And the reason, and this is just my opinion, there are a lot of lazy individuals out there who just expect the handout.
But can you get away with that in military?
Yeah. I personally, if I wouldn't want to be fighting next to someone who physically and emotionally does not want to be there and who was forced there. However, in saying that, in Vietnam, it had, you know, some of the best fighters were our conscripts. So
what's that mean?
So the lotto, so I think they were 21 or 20-year-olds. It's just a lotto, birth date, come out, off you go and get your training, and you go to Vietnam. And some of our best fighters were conscripts. So you did your year of compulsory service. I don't think we're at the day and age where we could do that. Maybe some sort of a program aligned.
What do you think's holding it back? Like when you say, I don't think we could do that.
We're a peacekeeping nation. You know, we're not a war-fighting nation.
Yeah, right. So you can't still just go and prepare yourself just in case?
I think some of the fundamentals of army training, and or I'll say army because that's what I know, but defence training would help. The discipline, you know, just having, you know, some values, and like I said, get up, make a bed, do all those small things to win the day. If you can teach somebody that, because there's a lot of adults who don't do that now. They just get up, throw their clothes on, and off they go for the day, come back and, you know, walk into a house that's an absolute shit fight. You know, washing needs to be done. There's, if you can start the day on a positive and teach some of those fundamentals to society, it'd be great. Similar to what we do with the youth programs now. It's the fundamentals, and maybe for some adults out there, it might help. Especially young adults, just crossing over that, 18 to 21. But you can't force them to be something like that. And I know there's a lot of ex-military guys out there who are running very similar programs for corporate businesses and everything else to help shape them to become better people. I know those programs are out there, but it's if you're talking a government-led thing, I don't know if that would work completely. Yeah. But it'd have to be a volunteer basis, I reckon. Yeah. But it would help.
But if World War III happened tomorrow, would we not all have to go or not?
Oh, I wouldn't have a clue. I would say that if directly impacted us and we had people landing on our beaches, we'd be doing the same as a society, and I think we'd come together pretty good because Australians are very resilient. We're very resilient people. We've shown that in the past. So, we do band together at the times of need, and and that's been shown in some of our floods and and things like that. I think, and that's where going back to respect. It's where respect comes for each other in those times. But in between those times, those soy lattes are going to get to all of us, aren't they?
We might finish up by just telling us about what you do for your non-for-profit.
Yeah, so once I transitioned out of defence, I know there's a lot of programs out there that were beneficial, but some of them I wasn't really invested in, and I wanted to create and be a part of something that would give me that healing and be around like-minded people. So the natural pathway there was already a couple of associations around. I approached the Gold Coast chapter. And, I said, I want to set something up on the Sunshine Coast. And me and a few other guys who also transitioned, and we were all like surfing together back in our unit. We just made it happen. And cool. It's grown quite rapidly, and we do believe in just being around the ocean. It does provide you some sort of healing. And the metaphor I like to use is, if you're out in the ocean, you're having a surf and you have a massive wipeout, and you've got two options. You can either paddle back into the beach and just sit there and watch all the waves go by, or you can paddle back out, and generally you're going to have some mates out in that water as well waiting for you. And if you paddle back out, shake off that wave that just wiped you out and sort of checked your ego a little bit, and you can have a conversation about it and connect, and then just keep moving forward, keep catching those waves. So that's why we established Association of Veteran Surfers on the Sunshine Coast, and it's growing quite rapidly now. I've taken the opportunity to step back as a president, sit as an ambassador, and let some of the other boys, take up the reins and with another fresh perspective and leadership, which is great. We have a great community, and it's not just about surfing. if you just want to be around some like-minded people and people who just have an enthusiasm in life and want to connect, because the veteran community is quite large out here, and since 2005 to 2020, we've had 1,600 suicides in the defence community. So that's non-serving and current serving members who have, subsequently taken their own lives. So if we can reduce some of that.
How do you see us reducing it?
Connecting. As soon as you leave defence, connect with someone, connect with, like us, and even if it's just a coffee on the beach, we're there and we'll be there. So we'll provide that consistency. That's our key messaging, is just give that consistency, and hopefully it helps. If we can help that one person, we've helped in some way. So we've been going for about 18 months now.
Have you ever had any dark moments like that?
Yes, I have. In 2021, I attempted suicide. Took a whole shitload.
That's when you left?
No, I was still in. Yep. I just had some shoulder surgery. It was my 4th shoulder reconstruction. I knew my career was coming to an end. I had suffering mass anxiety, depression, and I just decided to, take a shitload of pills and woke up not in the best way. And I knew that I had to get further help. I was already seeking help at that point, but I made a promise to my kids that day that I'd never do anything like that again, and I'd find some, purpose in life again. And and I think it's on the right pathway. There's still dark times. I still have massive depression dumps every now and again, but I know how to bring myself out of them through resilience. And
do you mind talking through what's going on when you're in those darks?
It's all self-worth. Yeah. You just don't want to be around anybody. For me, I'm usually quite an enthusiastic person, have high motivation, high drive, but I never want to let myself become that victim. I reckon it's a lot to do with a little bit of the ADHD as well, gets me moving, so I consider that a bit of a blessing. I think it brings me out of it a little bit. If I can get moving, just go for a drive down the beach, or it can get me going again. I don't rely on a solely pharmaceutical approach either. There's a lot of things that I need to get right, like get my mindset right, a little bit of mindfulness, just being at peace, and also just showing some self-care and telling myself it's going to be okay. And that's the resilience piece in me, and connection's a big one. Once if I can surround myself with people that can bring me out of that, it's a good thing. And there are many veterans out there who have done it for me as I've done that for them. So and I'll continue that.
So the guys leave, and then because they've been with all their brothers and for so long, and then they leave and they're all alone, that's what causes the depression, do you think?
I think so, yeah. It's because you lose your sense of purpose and belonging. So, if you asked me, let's say a year and a half ago, once I just left the army, if we just met, first thing you're going to ask, and most people do, it's just human instinct, is what do you do? For quite some time, it was proudly I would say, I'm a soldier, infantry soldier, army, proud, no hesitation. For quite a lot of people, once they leave, you get that question, and it really gets you thinking, oh shit, what do I do? People ask that all the time. Why don't we just change the way we approach? And this might be the respect thing, and instead of asking somebody what they do, ask who they are, and maybe that'll link to their values. And so now I just answer when someone says, what do you do? I just say I'm a kind, empathetic, compassionate, and a consistent human being. I'm Nathan. Who are you? And I think that's probably the best approach. It throws a lot of people off, but it helps me internally. Maybe a slice of that to some people might help.
Good idea. I think people, just on that, and we'll finish up, I think people do take a lot of pride in their identity. Is that? I mean, that's probably what's happened, right? So you've identified as a soldier and you're no longer, so you've lost that identity. And it's something that I've, because I've come from a meditation called Vipassana meditation, where you're kind of teaching yourself not to attach to anything. And I think, I'm a builder and I've studied architecture and I've got the pottery studio and do podcasts. And when people ask what I do, I kind of actually get stuck anyway. I'm like, fuck, what do I do?
Everything.
So I know what you mean, but from the other side where I do too many different things, I don't want to identify as any of them. Yeah. So I just kind of, I just do me.
Yeah. Identify as, through your values and obviously you definitely have a passion for a lot of things. And I purposely ask people, who they are, not what they do now. And, maybe it'll check some people as well. And, like us who just do a bit of everything. Yeah. And, maybe we'll become a compassionate or a more compassionate society if we start asking those questions.
I agree. Thanks for coming on, Nathan.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's good to hear your stories.